panel. Someone said that we're like loose women last night, which made me laugh. We're all trying to work out which ones we are. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask them a question as well, which is, what is their best customer service experience that they've had and why? And then we're going to kick off with that, and then Hannah's going to do a brief presentation. So, Hannah.
Thank you. So my name's Hannah Marsh, and I'm one of the co-founders of HomeViews. We are the review platform for residential developments. I'll tell you a bit more about it soon. But my best customer experience, I think we all have an expectation of what customer service looks like. And it's when someone goes a bit further and does something they don't necessarily need to do, or it's when it really kind of excels. So last summer, my brother got married and the whole family went out to a tiny island in Greece. And my niece, aged 5, lost her teddy bear, and they got on the plane, and I was on a later flight, and we went and told one of the team at their sort of office, and they sent somebody who went back up to the villas, searched the whole villa, found her teddy bear, put it in a taxi, sent it to the port to meet me so I could take a teddy bear back to England. And I just thought that was quite amazing. So anyone that's a parent probably knows how much a returned teddy bear would mean to a 5-year-old child.
Great. Silvana.
I'm Silvana Young, Get Living. I have the privilege of leading the design team within Get Living, who we work with all of our design teams, designing the brief from concept through to the end of construction across all our different sites. I actually interpreted the question slightly differently, and I was just thinking about different events and things, and I kind of looked at larger events and smaller events and then just plumbed for. I think my favourite one was we run various size events in our different neighbourhoods, and we do something called After Hours, where we just bring in local acts to come and perform in different locations. And we did one, I don't know if anyone has been to East Village, but we've got the wetlands area, which is just a really lovely green area. And we just threw some beanbags down on the floor and had some acoustic acts with one evening at sunset, and everyone was just sitting around and lounging. And to me, it was just such a perfect evening, sort of sat there with the family, just having a drink and listening to some really nice music.
Right, thank you.
Awesome. So I'm really loud. So I'm Ramona Bodden, and I work with Yardi Systems. I primarily focus on our Rent Cafe and CRM products for marketing websites and things like that. My best customer service experience was after a very long and delayed flight to Barcelona for my birthday last year. There was an issue with my hotel room. So they did not have my room ready, and they initially told me, just give us a few hours, we'll find something. They ended up coming back 15 minutes later, upgrading me to the executive suite, and then for myself and my kids. And then also they sent me up a fruit basket. And I thought that was really nice that they were trying to make sure that I was happy, and they checked on me to make sure everything was fine.
Great.
Hello, I'm Eva, and I am with Greystar, looking after the regional operations from already existing active properties, going all the way through to development and planning. And my example, I guess, would be similar to Hannah from a Greek island experience where we had a very early morning ferry trip where I think we had to be on the ferry at 6 a.m. in the morning, and we flew into very late in the evening the night before, without having any kind of, very, very busy time when you're not together, you're finishing off your work and everything is last minute. So in the morning, when we woke up, the hotel manager had prepared little kind of packs for us with coffee to go and little breakfast, because it's just way too early to have the breakfast arrangement. And I guess the thoughtfulness and the ability not to be overbearing, and giving us the space and the ability to take it with us if we need to. That was very, very nice and a key for me.
Great, thank you. Hannah, over to you and your presentation.
Thank you. Perfect. So I hope a lot of you in the room might know about HomeViews by now. We launched just over a year ago and have very much been dubbed the TripAdvisor for property, which probably sums up the introduction in terms of what we do. Let me just click through to, there we go. Just a little bit about home views before going into the data that I'm going to present, so it gives some context. We list reviews much like TripAdvisor does for a residential development. We have over 8,500 reviews on site now across 900 new build developments in 8 UK cities. I'm glad to say that we're working with a lot of the build to rent sector who are proactively seeking out resident feedback and engagement to sort of learn from the insights that residents can share. Some of our key differentiators, we do verify, and that's a really important thing for us. We use tech to make sure that we can verify the residents who live in the building. So it's very much trusted and transparent. And those are the reviews that count towards the scores for the development. One resident writes one review, and it's done by development, not brand. So we're building data and insights at a development level. So we can look at an overarching score for a portfolio, but actually we're collating insights at very much at a building and experience level there. We also collect a number of different data points. So this isn't just about collecting a review, which is a single star rating and a small comment. This is about actually collecting some deeper insights, some comparable data, and actually being able to compare and contrast what residents are experiencing within a building so we can start to standardize that across the industry. I'm just going to present today a few excerpts from our most recent report. We presented some of the headlines at the end of last year, and we now have a very much in-depth 64-page booklet if anyone wants to read it through, looking into the tenant experience. So this covers over 5,000 tenants, all living within new build. It's a split between build to sell and build to rent. Of the 84 build to rent developments included, this does represent about 37% of the occupied build to rent sector at that time. And this goes across 8 UK cities. So I thought I'd put a bit of a fun slide up there. You might actually see your own brand. We got a lot of these reviews from sending out our own independent ground teams to go to buildings and collect reviews, and then also through partnerships and attending resident events. So it does represent a big sector of the market. So the standout headline, which is wonderful news for build to rent, is that build to rent has been rated higher than build to sell in every category that we had by tenants. There are some standouts. Building management shone through particularly highly. So when we're comparing what the build to rent management experience is like, the average score for build to rent was 4.28 out of 5, compared to those that were renting within build to sell developments at 3.85. I'll dig into a little bit about why we think that is, and we've got some data points around that and some things that we can look at. So what do residents love? In summary, we kind of went through all the data, and there's very detailed chapters by chapters, but really just to pull out some main themes, which were mentioned this morning on some of the earlier panels. Management, it came through so strongly. The management scores were some of the biggest gaps between build to sell and build to rent. Management was actually mentioned in 60% of build to rent reviews. So residents talked about the excellent service, the quick communication. They talked about events. They talked about a smiling face to welcome them home. And I think we saw that personalised nature that came through with lots of different building managers referenced by name, the fact that they knew who I am, they know what I want, and that real kind of personal touch, that someone cares, was often something that was mentioned in lots of the reviews. Many developments offer an on-site concierge, and this had actually almost 20% correlation to a higher management score when one was being offered, particularly when it was being offered at 24 hours. And this was highlighted specifically, the concierge by name and reference, in 34% of the reviews for the top 10 build-to-rent developments by facilities ratings. So we can see it from the data, from the frequency of mention, how important management is. Another big one that came through, which was about pets. Everyone loves pets. So 74% of the buildings that we had looked at for build-to-rent were pet-friendly, and this differed drastically to what we see within the build-to-sell sector, where the lease often doesn't allow a tenant to bring the animal into their building. And alongside management, this had the highest correlation to higher ratings for a building that we could see as a consistent theme. And it was frequently mentioned as something that brought community together, people connected around their animals, and it was a general well-being sentiment that came through across those development sites. The other things that we saw for what they loved was actually a really strong focus on location. Location score on average was 4.43 out of 5 on home views for build-to-rent locations. And in the regions, this increased to 4.67 out of 5, so incredibly high. What was often referenced was that a lot of the locations that these developments have been built in have really easy transport connections for work. They've got on-site amenities that they can walk to and access. And people feel like whilst they might not be in some of the more kind of central, desirable locations, maybe when you might think of it when it comes to London, the fact that actually they've got everything they need to create a home in their location, but also be able to easily commute to where they need to get to, shone through. So a very positive score in terms of some of the locations. Community, so this really builds on management, but when we look at the top 10 build-to-rent developments, all of them have communal spaces. This is again something that was mentioned this morning. And we see this as well, it correlates with design scores. So some of those developments that got highest design scores had communal spaces that were being utilised and operated with events being provided. So it's about how people are experiencing the building. So the fact that there are events encouraging them to use those communal spaces, encouraging them to use the outside balconies and space because there's a barbecue happening. It all correlates with this feeling of community, use of the building, use of the space. It goes beyond just their single flat unit. So communal spaces and events had almost an 8% and almost a 10% correlation to a higher star rating for a building. 12% of all build-to-rent reviews talk about community, specifically mentioning community, which is incredibly high. Of the top 10 build-to-rent developments by management score, we saw a high number of them talking about the different benefits of community. So rather than it being at 12%, it was 23% of those top 10 actually referenced about community in their building. 10% referred to the management as either their friend, this is within that 23%, or as someone who went above and beyond to ensure their happiness and safety. 3% of reviews mentioned their management by name. So I've talked about what they love, and we were asked by David to be maybe a little bit contentious today. So I've also put up some of the things that could possibly be improved, and I've put up a couple of quotes, which some people might not like so much, but we want to share the good and the bad that we see on the site. Parking was actually something that came up quite often across build to rent, and it was the most prevalent complaint was around the fact that often in the build to rent developments there might not be parking available when they thought there was. There might not be parking available for their guests or visitors, or the fact that when they found out there was parking available, it was at a much higher price than what was available nearby on the streets for those local residents who were able to get permits. And it sort of was a bit of an irritation or bugbear. So 28% of build-to-rent developments had residents talking about parking in some format in their reviews. Repairs and maintenance. So whilst the average repairs and maintenance score was 3.92 out of 5, this is actually higher than the after-sales care score for new build owners at 3.58. It was still the lowest score for build-to-rent, and it was something that was mentioned enough that it came through as a sort of consistent theme. There are lots of people getting it absolutely right, but it's not always across the case. What else could be improved? Well, actually the absence of community. So when community isn't being created, that's also referenced quite often in reviews. The fact that I don't know my neighbours, there isn't a connectivity here. And importantly as well, which from a new build perspective is very interesting, ventilation came up, and actually almost 30% of all of our reviews, both build to sell and build to rent, referred to ventilation in some form. And it was a theme that we did see consistently last summer when we had the particular heat wave. All of the reviews came through with the fact that people wanted improvement in the ventilation, particularly the communal spaces and the corridors of their apartments and flats. So even when we look at the top 10 developments, build to rent developments by design score, 8 of those top 10 still had residents complaining about poor ventilation in their buildings. So there still could be improved. So really just in summary, residents are experiencing a hotel-like experience, and that comes through in the facilities they've been offered, the fact that they can bring their pets, that there's communal internal spaces, and we can see here from some of the top 10 rated, the gold bar, in terms of some of the facilities that they're all consistently offering to their residents, and the difference in score, even compared to the build to sell. And what we saw as some of the key differences was communal spaces, events, pet friendly, and also a gym. People like the gym. When it comes to location, just again in summary, the tighter, compact, smaller city centres seemed to be doing better in the regions. But when it came to London, it was actually some of the further out zones that we saw higher location scores. So in fact, they were benefiting from maybe a slightly lower rent because we're a little bit further out, but you've got easy and quick transport connections and maybe more amenities that you can walk to, because crime and safety was something that was consistently mentioned, but usually in reference to the fact that I feel safe because I have a concierge, I feel safe because there's CCTV. So it was often actually seen as a sort of positive. We've got I just thought I'd do a nice little shout out for members of my panel. So actually to say that the top location score development in London was East Village, with residents talking about that they had that quick connectivity, the amenities from site, green spaces, and we see that through the location score for East Village. We also, for Greystar, what came across consistently as well was the community and events space, and actually people feeling like they're building a community within those spaces, either for families or getting to meet people in a new city. And that came across strongly in terms of that real opportunity to create something. So really, in summary, building management is central to that community piece. We see that, as I said, 12% of tenants wrote about community in their development and gave those reasons as events, pet-friendly management. So it all comes back to customer service. It's not so much necessarily about the physical aspects of the building. It's about how that building is being utilised by the team and how they're creating a space that people are calling home. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. That's great. Shall we just start by asking Silvana and Eva if there's anything, particularly as you're sort of on the operational side, that surprised you about Hannah's presentation, and any feedback on sort of what we can learn, I suppose.
I'll start. So, thank you, Hannah. No real surprises. I'd say, absolutely delighted to see that build to rent is scoring higher than the build for sale. We've been operating now for just over 6 years in East Village, and we are still constantly learning. It's all a matter of getting that feedback. So it's reinforced the view that we know where we need to keep going. We know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, and we're constantly learning. So how to get the improvement, and it's that challenge of how do you take the buildings. It's a little bit like what was talked about in some of the earlier sessions today. You very quickly start to get that aging stock, and how do you make that work, and but it's about being creative with the spaces that you've got. And so no surprises. Very good.
Equally for me, not kind of large surprises, but it's been very delightful and interesting to see the appreciation from the residents about the community and of management, and this kind of, I guess, the creation of this home, people's home, and the attention and care that goes in through the teams, and that is actually being appreciated rather than overlooked, and it's a nice to have rather than essential. So I think that was a really nice thing to see, that this is being appreciated. Truly, and we're moving all in the right direction with build to rent.
Great. If I start with Ramona, so obviously this data is fascinating and valuable. How, from sort of your perspective, how can data really help us better understand our customers? And obviously HomeViews goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel, obviously you've come here from America,
Yes.
Do you feel that there's a lack of data, not so much on performance of assets, but on the customer experience and what customers are looking for?
Yes. So to answer your question, for the data that's available, that portion, there isn't much data out there. I know in the US, there are a lot of online forums and things like that where communities are speaking to each other. They have created maybe marketing genius type forums where they tell their experiences, what they're doing for their customers and things like that. But for here, it doesn't seem like that information is shared. I think it's something that would definitely go very far to share that information. That way people can not necessarily feel as though it's a competition, but more so sharing the data across the board so that you can focus on other things. Also, I think with HomeView, so the reputation management, making sure that you are kind of locked into any reviews that are going on for the different property management reviews that are available for people. You should be checking it and things like that to reply back to any residents or applicants that may have issues, maybe using social media like Facebook or even Instagram for polls to find out what are the residents looking for and kind of implement some of those things to see what they would be more favorable for. Would they want a event outside listening to music and relaxing after a long day of work, or would they prefer to have a pool party? Those types of things that you can engage with your residents to see what they want, you can easily implement those. And there's all kinds of reporting on it as well. You can use analytics, things like that, to track your traffic as it comes in and see where people are spending the most time on your pages. Maybe you need to invest more information into that for marketing sites.
And what are Get Living doing to sort of help you understand your customers and continuous improvement, I suppose?
We're getting tighter relationship with HomeViews.
Yeah.
We've from day one, every month, we've done surveys of our residents, whether they be moving in midterm or moving out. So every month we hear, and there's sort of you can normally see if a theme comes through 3 times consistently, you start to pick up and really react to that. But one of the other things we also use is, I'm just going to refer to how we call it so I get it right, anonymised mobile phone data. So it's, we look in the public Wi-Fi at where people are hanging out, and we use that to also understand. So we can see which retailers are much more popular, which ones are less popular, and feedback, so we can reinforce that. We put in a London Passive Architecture structure into the space one year, and it was amazing how that suddenly, we could tell from that Wi-Fi data how much it became a hub and how much it became part of where people were hanging out, to the point where it was only a temporary wooden structure. And when we are now in the throes of creating a much more permanent structure in a similar place to, again, because we can see the way that people react to the space. So we're learning, and that's what we do. We're getting better at understanding our data.
Great stuff.
Likewise, home use has definitely been a very, very beneficial for us to truly understand a very kind of independent view from the residents. But there has been several different surveys, just like yourselves tonight, during the tours or after tours, move-ins, after maintenance, kind of servicing the apartments, and prior to move-outs. And we use Kingsley and various different kind of email, online-based environments. However, I have to say the biggest impact, or the biggest kind of chance for us to truly get the qualitative feedback would be through the teams who are working on site every day, talking to people, and they have the ability to probe into those little details about, what is it that was good about it, or what would you change, or not necessarily. You can always do this on a kind of a tick box exercise. So that has definitely been very, very kind of insightful for us, which we will obviously continue. And we've got people on site and hands-on and teams operating. So this is constant communication.
Actually, can I add on to that? Actually, playing off that, yes, we use the front of hat line lettings people who give us the feedback, and relationship managers who do the ongoing, we get feedback too. But actually, the maintenance team are probably the best people who we get feedback for how things are really using, because they're the ones who go in and see it. And in terms of using that on a design side wise, I just last month ran a session where I invited I took all of our maintenance guys out for lunch, and then got them to freely speak about the things that they see in the buildings that they go into. But I also had the development managers in there too, so they could hear firsthand. So when they're saying to us, oh yes, no, it's fine, we've got this all in hand and this is all there, but then the maintenance guys are going in and saying, well, actually on a daily basis we're seeing these little things. We're getting that feedback too, which is working really well.
So obviously, HomeView's data is capturing people that are already in the building, but the customer journey starts a lot before that. And so, how when do you think the customer journey starts? At what point do you feel that you have to control the customer experience, or where you can? And also, what have you found works and doesn't work? I mean, I think people know quite a lot of secret shopping, and so we're experiencing the bit before, because obviously we don't then move in, but before someone moves in. So we have, quite a lot of experience of the experience before you become a resident. So what do you do? When do you feel the customer journey starts, and how are you managing that, particularly, to make sure that it's consistent from the beginning to the end, because you can lose someone before they've even started, really.
To me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it starts from the moment you're doing your placemaking, from your online moment, from your face-to-face moment. We've definitely had, we're trying to get ourselves to a point where somebody can view a property, sign up go through the referencing process and sign up within an hour. Now that's a name we've got, and we're getting closer to it. We use a lot of technology to try and get us through this phase, and we've definitely had our glitches. So we are definitely like, don't try it yet, because we're not there with it yet. But it's that seamlessness of trying to, so that journey starts right from day one when someone is making contact with you, and we're getting better, but we're not there yet. But I think one of the things you get in the build to rent that comes through in the customer service is you have to be responsive, and that has to be at every stage of the journey, whether they're just making an inquiry or they've been living with you for 3 years and wanting to stay. Whatever it is, you have to be responsive. So that's where I think that's where the build to rent stands out.
I actually have another perspective on it. So on doing the marketing sites, which yours was absolutely great. I think for doing the marketing sites and setting them up, I think the customer journey starts from the minute they search. Once they click on the internet and they start searching for properties and things like that, they may type in certain keywords. That's where your SEO and SEM comes into play to advertise your property. And then when they click on your site, those images and those videos and words that you use can actually make a prospect want to live there. If they can visualize themselves there with nice crisp photos and seeing any community events or reviews and things like that that you may advertise on your site, that will draw them more into becoming a potential tenant to your property. I think that doing nudge marketing and offering where you push them to apply online with discounts. You've probably seen it on different marketing sites like Amazon, well, maybe not Amazon, maybe Nike or Nordstrom or things like that, where they offer you a 10% discount if you go ahead and start shopping today. You can do things like that. Anything you can do to entice the prospects to come in, it draws them in more. And then any communication that may be automated, whether it's someone clicking the button or it's an automated response, that constant engagement brings more prospects in because they feel as though you're really invested in them and want to bring them to your property.
Yeah. I add to that. I think you're absolutely right. It always surprises me and my team when we go in and present home views and actually show some of the team, if you Google your brand or your building name, what's coming up, and it amazes me sometimes how few people remember they've ever done it. We always put the challenge out there because that's the first thing that someone's discovering. They might have been on a portal and they might have been searching for what's in their affordability, but then they're going to go off and do their own research before they might even contact you. And what is being found? What's their first impression of you once they step away from the portal search? And we see over sort of about 35% of our traffic now is people specifically searching for the building name and the word review, and they're seeking out that information, and they want to read that before they're necessarily even going to engage with you. But we're sort of learning more about people's journey, and we can see that people are searching for that kind of information and that impression of that early decision making, but also they're coming back and reading it after they've even done a viewing. Because it's all part of informing their decision and experience.
And I absolutely agree. But one thing I think we haven't touched upon, which I think is really, really important, is this transparency and the clarity and the consistency of the information. Because I find that when you Google and you go to our website and you see, you know, all of us, we go to portals like Rightmove or our own website or anywhere else. And if there is any kind of information that is not clear, not consistent, we in our sector are responsible of making sure that, I guess, we hold our good name amongst kind of the shadow market and those kind of individual landlords who might not necessarily have the best interest of the residents at heart. And we need to be able to demonstrate that we are actually trying to create an environment that is the best for the residents, and we're thinking about their living experience and their ability to stay with us for day one all the way through, whether it is 6 months, 12 months, 3 years or more, across our brands or across the portfolios. And I think that, you know, if a person looks at something online and calls up and the information is not the same, or people don't know when there's inconsistencies, that could really put someone off, because it almost feels like, well, you're just saying something that doesn't have any meaning. And that is really, really big piece as well, I think.
Great. I mean, I know, Hannah, you've got loads more data. So we'll start with you with this question. But what, from what you've seen, is more important, great design and amenities or customer service? I read somewhere the other day that the new amenities community. So especially for the next generation. And what lessons do you think have been learned about design from the customer's perspective? This is for all of you.
Yeah, I mean, I just building on the point raised by McKenna from Grace earlier this morning, the fact that some of those initial events maybe might not have been well attended, but actually we persevere and we build a community. And we see that reflected in the reviews when the effort's been made to support people to want to use those spaces. Sometimes we've heard from operators that a particular space hasn't been utilised at all, but actually my kind of challenge back is, well, how much have you done to facilitate people utilising that space in the building? I think there's so many interesting data points around sort of like how you can track people when they've got fobs, and you can see where they've gone in the building, and actually you can see which spaces that they are actually using from a facilities point of view. Is it worthwhile having the gym, because actually how many people are going in? So there's a lot that data can teach us, but what comes across in the reviews is it's all about how the management team can best support people to maximise all aspects of the design of the building, and that just really elevates the experience as a whole.
Yeah, it is about the curation. So it's about the design is there to facilitate you being able to do what you can and to create. Good design can definitely ease the great service, but great service has to be the underlying point of everything that you're doing. What am I trying to say? So if you're thinking about your flexibility and curation from the start, then when you have an event, when you're first leasing up the building, you will put a little bit more time into creating actual events, because you haven't got the community yet to make that authentic. So you're sort of talking to people and putting in things, but I think it becomes much more authentic once the actual community are running it themselves. So you need that flexibility to be able to shift what it is that you're doing. So, you know, for the visuals at the moment on a new building that we're launching, we're showing a spin room, because that's what a lot of people are talking about at the moment, and it looks great, but essentially it's a flexible space. If when that building is launched in 2-3 years time, we put the spin bikes in, maybe we will. I mean, it could well be, but we might be putting something completely different in. But we know that the things that are really taking off from the resident themselves at the moment are film screening nights and knit and natter groups and actually board games nights. You just need a space. So we've got a community space where people can go and just do what it is that they want to do.
For me, I think it's definitely analyzing all of the tracking information. I know I keep emphasizing using tracking, but with things like Google Analytics or Facebook has tracking, and there's so many different vendors that have tracking codes you can put kind of behind the scenes to see where everybody's going. and see the engagement, how long they've been on that page. If someone is really interested in your fitness center, for example, they might spend more time maybe watching videos, and that tells you, okay, maybe we need to spend more time updating our site with more information on our fitness center, make more things visual versus words everywhere, and kind of use that information from the reviews. Like when I personally, personally for me, when I was looking for a flat, moving here, and I was trying to find some place to go to, Home Views was one of the places I went to see what other people were saying about the community. You listen to what other residents say before you make that decision. If they're happy there and they feel like it's a community, you have maybe local area advertisement for discounts, you'll be more likely to want to live there and apply for a place there where you know other people's experience than just being blindfolded and just picking a spot type of thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things for us is also make sure that we are flexible and we are allowing those communities to form naturally and organically. So when we're developing the project, you anticipate there would be a high, I don't know, a young couple, young professionals who are coming in, or you think that there will be lots of families, and then a couple of years go past or a year goes past and you realize the client base is completely different. So to be able to allow, and obviously we've got the spaces, but to be able to allow for the services and the different events that go into those spaces to be formed by the actual residents and what they need. So we've done really kind of exactly like that. So we've got one of our properties in Cellmakers where we've got a great gym with several different kind of studio spaces, and we provide different exercise classes. And initially we were kind of very certain that there would be 3 different type of exercise regimes that people would sign up for. And we learned it wasn't like that. So for us to be able to have the flexibility to turn it around and say, actually, there is much more need on a boxing class compared to a yoga studio or activities around kind of more relaxing activities. So having that ability to change based on what your clients and customers will tell you is really key. But there's definitely need to go and facilitate those gatherings and make sure that it becomes natural and normal for people, especially when you have, you know, in London, it's very, very international market. People don't necessarily understand what that means. And it's a young client base who are very often a little bit more self-conscious and not as outgoing or not as comfortable to go and network, you know, so you need to be able to prepare for that.
Which leads me on to my last question, which will start with you. So I think, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I sat on this stage and said something like, well, you know, we don't want to be told to have pizza on a Friday, because we were sort of only talking about American experiences and we didn't have any data here. So, and we've got a nice sort of international and also not just London-centric panel. So do you think that communities can be orchestrated? And how much better do we need to be about learning about the differences of what people want, say, between Americans and British people, or, you know, Chinese students to UK students, or even from Manchester to London? And how do we create real advocates for the sector by giving people a sort of a community experience? So Eva, do you want to start?
So interestingly enough, I had a long conversation to our US colleagues, understanding, you know, how different is it compared to UK. And funnily enough, the operators who have been experiencing both of the markets have been quite surprised to see that the trends are very similar. Obviously, their customer base is different. The expectation and knowledge of what the multifamily industry is different. But the expectations of people and what they truly want is simplicity, flexibility, ability to be able to change their mind if they need to, move around if they need to. And that's what build to rent is all about, because you are renting and you want the flexibility because the work might take you elsewhere, or you have family that is growing, or you have children, or you grow old and your children move out and you want to move around, and the flexibility and ability to do that on a short notice is a key that we have found, which is very similar to what we've seen for the few years that we've had properties in London. But there are definitely trends between the different cultures, and we can see there's a huge kind of community building amongst our Chinese residents, for example, and the trust element of when your friend has said this is good and I'm happy there and they take care of me and I can trust them. There's a huge key. So I feel like making sure people understand that you are there to support them and want to make sure that their living experience is good, that naturally creates those advocates, just word of mouth. And even if situations change, it's funny enough, we had a couple of residents who were recently discovered that they moved from Sailmakers, which is in the heart of Canary Wharf, across the town at Greenford, which is a completely different environment, and you wouldn't expect a Chinese student necessarily finding that this is the area that they would want to move in, but they were really invested in a brand, and they said, we love it, we absolutely love it, but you know, my work was somewhere else, and actually I'd want to stay with you, and that's where we can create and cultivate those ambassadors.
I agree. You've got to understand, you know, where you are and where you're operating. We run a number of different scale of events, so we'll do sort of larger events which might go into sort of 5,000 to 10,000 people turning up to an event, which we'll do less frequently, and then we bring it right down to, say, supper clubs or the after hours or lates, just various different things where we're more targeting sort of 30 to 60 people coming along. And what we've noticed between London and Manchester is that London are much more blasé. So you might have an event and people sign up to come, but we will also always oversubscribe to a certain extent because we know that people won't turn up. And then we do the same events in Manchester, and what we've learned is that actually everyone turns up, whatever the weather, if it's indoor or outdoor. So we did some lovely canal-side jazz nights, and it was pouring with rain, fully expected no one to come, and we'd oversubscribed it and everyone came. And they just bunched up into a space that wasn't quite big enough. So yeah, we see differences that way. We also have one specific building which has become very popular with Chinese students, way higher budgets than the London average market. But again, we've had to change the kind of events that we do because they're not really that interested in alcohol. So, you know, sort of these other evenings where we might have done like gin tasting in Manchester went down incredibly well. We're not going to run that in an event where you're aiming at 20 students. So, but it's still part of the community. You still want the advocates. So you just flex, and you've got to do that to be authentic.
Great. It's quite a short session. So has anyone got any questions?
The most value for your customers going forward? Is there any way you measure that impact?
So, are you talking about from the design going forward, or just
Yeah, probably
events?
design and operationally, like events. So if you're putting on events for supper clubs, how do you translate that into creating a better product, retaining customers, for creating new schemes? How do you benchmark that?
So it's very difficult, is my first thing. A lot of it is hearsay and anecdotal from when we overhear. So we've got residents who we know because they told us that they've moved in because they came to an event with another friend and thought, wow, I want to live somewhere where they put on, you know, a barbecue event or whatever else it is. They came along, so they were impressed by that, but that's very anecdotal. So overall, we know that our referencing, we know that I think on some months up to 20% of our new move-ins are through referrals, but whether that's from an event or just like how that's tracked, I don't think, it's hard to know specifically. Every scheme is looked at in its own merits, and how much meat we try to put in is going to vary. A lot of it, following on from the discussion this morning, a lot of it is about the viability. So yes, we know there needs to be something that you make the spaces as truly flexible as you can, so that you can tick off as many different uses. So, the requests that we get range from salsa classes to paint like Banksy art classes to pizza making to pinata making to, so it varies. So, and then we had one building that was absolutely, they wanted to see the royal wedding last year. So, you just, so long as you've got a good space and a good venue, and when it works during the day, more and more co-working people will go and sit and chill in those spaces. So you've just got to get the right, it's got to be the right proportion to the scale of the project that you've got, and it's got to feel comfortable and inviting. So that's through the design, and then the curation has got to be authentic so that people like it, and then but hard to get through data.
And I'd absolutely echo in terms of the spaces, because these spaces are very expensive. Rent in London is extremely high, and so is space. And the more space that you, in theory, have in idle, where you don't have monthly revenue coming in, you really need to pay attention to what you put in there and how many events you want to put throw in there, and the additional money going in the events as well. So I think it really also matters on which specific area in London you are, because I don't think it's fair to say London in general or UK in general. I think, there are areas in London where there's massive family properties and it's much greater value to have bigger apartments. Whereas there are some areas in London that we would turn around and say people are happy with their apartments, they are living there alone, but they would want to have spaces to kind of network and interact with other residents, which enables us to then justify having bigger spaces. But it's really, really difficult to I guess, kind of get the correct data or the quality of the data, other than just continuing doing what you're doing. And the reality is that you will not find it out within 6 months or 9 months. It is a consistent process of putting it on a year and another year and seeing how that impacts, and then reading back to it and evaluating that. And I think that's the key, is to be able to kind of look back and see, has that made a difference, and have those communications with the residents.
Can I just add, we work a lot with local retailers, which I feel really helps that sense of community, because you're then not this little island of your building. Get Living, we have, we're very fortunate that we're never just one building, we're always sort of a little mini neighbourhood, or not so many neighbourhoods, depending on where we are. So you're using a whole space, but if you get that buy-in, you need to fit in very well.
Can I just add to that as well? I think what's interesting is we've spoken today a lot about sort of data and sharing, and I think some of the conversations that we're having, we're now speaking at a sort of governmental local authority level, where they're looking for data insights about what residents are saying and what they want, and what reporting we can give as a sector, because there's a huge data gap even when it comes to the decision makers around planning and permission on land, and what's happening in terms of what's being fulfilled for residents as communities being built. And so actually for us to start to quantify, and some of the conversations we've there, like, is this even an issue? Like we hear from a few people that X might be a problem, or we hear from a few people that maybe we should be doing more in sustainability, but there's no kind of data point that actually shows what do actually residents really want. So we're kind of interested in some of the conversations we're starting to have about how consistent data that we're collecting can start to build a more quantified picture about resident feedback, what they're looking for, what is well-being something that they want, is well-being something they're going to pay for. So I think there's a lot that can be done collectively if we start to sort of pull those insights.
There was another question there.
the external spaces around the buildings and the role that build to rent can have within the wider context. In terms of what I think has been achieved at Middlewood Lotsey in the south of Manchester is that that's been transformative for the entire area. So I think build to rent has a massive opportunity to do that, and it's about the wider community, not just the customers and clients within build to rent. So it goes, you actually provide something well beyond your own customers, so which I think is very, very commendable.
Thank you. Thank you. That's amazing to hear.
Question there.
I work for a company called uhomes, uhomes.com. We specialize in helping, referring international students, but mainly Chinese students to find rented accommodation across quite a few countries, which are very popular with Chinese students in terms of education. So, in the previous, we always refer the students to purpose-built student accommodation, and from our survey, we have seen that more and more like Chinese students much prefer to stay in built-to-rent properties because that's exactly how they live back in China. Bigger space and brand new buildings, and this is the main thing. It's brand new. Majority of them are brand new buildings. So we have been trying to expand our property portfolios. Unfortunately, only Get Living and Great Star would like to work with us. And majority of the build-to-rent providers told us that they don't want any students. So I would like to understand or get some help from you guys. What's the concerns of having students in build-to-rent properties?
I suggest that traditionally, and I think from what we're seeing now in reality, it's different with this Chinese student market that's coming in. Traditionally, a student will come in September and leave in June. And with the build to rent, we're trying to create a community. So students per se weren't seen as being necessarily part of that community because it was so short stay. But what we're seeing happen over the years though is the fact that actually they are staying at that summer period, they're still staying as part of that community.
Yeah, and exactly what I wanted to say is that we've noticed that, I think Michelle also mentioned it earlier, where when those people are getting the jobs and will need to live here and not just study here and also work, they will go back to what they find that they've had good experiences with and they've had that community feel, and why would you leave that? So we've had instances of that, and I think that there is, it's all new. It's all new for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's anything new and anything unknown is sometimes a bit scary, or people are, a little bit cautious of entering this. And I think we just need to, I guess, give it a little bit more time for people to understand that it's like any other tenant, any other resident, any other nation, and it's just a natural flow of that.
But the good news is that the UK government have launched a new visa called post-study work visa, and a lot of Chinese students coming to study here, they are master students. So that means they will be coming here from this year, the intake for 2020, September 2020, they will be able to stay for 1 year, and after graduation, they have 2 more years to stay. And we know that they would love to stay in built-to-rent buildings and look for a job after graduation. So that should be good news for built-to-rent sector for us.
Can I ask you a question? Because we advise developers on what to provide, and we spend a lot of time talking about the pros and cons of students or no students. But from your understanding, do your customers want brand new flats, and are they interested in the amenity space and the service? What's the thing that would drive them into a build-to-rent building? Is it the whole package? Is it a brand new apartment? Is it a sense of security? We understand it's a sense of security.
Yeah, I think there are three things. First of all, sense of security. It's 24-hour concierge. That's one thing, because they are coming over for the first time to a country where they're not familiar with at all. That's the first thing that the students themselves and the parents consider. And two, brand new buildings. Chinese people love brand new buildings. And three, it's the amenity and the kind of the space. They are so everyone, well, majority of the people, I'd say, live in a built-to-rent building in China. Like, even though we own the home, but it's built to rent. There are very few houses in China. That's what I'm trying to say. Everything is apartment flats. So that's what they are very used to. And when they come to study in the UK, they at the moment they only have either private owned apartments or purpose-built student accommodation. That's why we see a big trend, a large demand from Chinese students, especially for the 2020 students who much prefer to stay in built-rent properties. That's why my colleague and myself are coming to learn about built-to-rent and why students are not accepted.
That's great. That was a slight veering away from the topic. That's very interesting. Does anyone else have any burning questions? I think we're meant to have finished by now. But if anyone has anything else that they'd like to ask, we could probably fit one more question in. One at the back, just a quick one. Is that okay? We're going to be kicked off just one more.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about the connectivity in buildings and the Wi-Fi and how high up that ranks for residents, whether that's something they look at before they move into a building.
Well, I can start off by saying that there's a lot of data out there in terms of how important it is. But I think that what we see on home views is that it's an expectation. So only 4% of tenant reviews even talk about Wi-Fi connectivity, and it's usually a negative when it hasn't been provided in the way that they expect. There's definitely a strong correlation with higher scores for developments that have Wi-Fi included. We can see that there's when it is referenced as a positive, it's talked about the fact it's amazing, it's all included and it was set up. When it's mentioned from a negative perspective, it's because the operator, the developer, has signed an exclusive package with somebody, which limits the tenant having any flexibility on what they can then choose. So there might be the problem, I can't get Sky Q, and if I'd known that, I wouldn't have moved in. This isn't set up, or I can't change the package I've got because they've already fixed it. So it's not mentioned massively on site, and mainly because we're looking at new builds and people have an expectation that it's just going to be there.
It's definitely an expectation, as in I think any one of us, as soon as you cut the internet off or Wi-Fi off, then we're blind, deaf, mute, we can't do anything, right? So it's in your home and you want to be able to make sure it's fast, reliable and easy. And I think, with built-to-rent sector anyways, anything that we do, we need to make sure it's easy and simple and quick, just as connection through Wi-Fi or setting it up or having it set up initially.
I'd concur. I'd say actually in our student blog, I think I was actually told that the internet was more important than hot water. So,
we just did some work with Hyperoptic and surveyed the industry, and so I'll plug that research. It's very interesting, but yeah, it was absolutely considered to be as important as any, if not more important than any utility that we have. So yeah.
And I can say in the US, that's one of the top amenities that they offer on their site. They'll put it at the top of the list because most of the people that are coming, they want to work from home or have the option to work from home. They want to, when they do come home, they can just relax or allow their kids, instead of using their mobile phones and using all of their data up, they can use the Wi-Fi to look at videos, TikTok. I cannot tell you how long my kids spend on TikTok, but it gives them that additional availability of being able to use the internet without having to use their mobile devices.
Right, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. So thank you to my lovely panel.